Okay, well, welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, and welcome to our tradition of prepping ourselves for spring and fall town meetings, but spring in this case, and we're happy to have with us again Town Moderator Jeff Alderson and Fincom Chair Todd Gillenwater, who very graciously take the time to walk us through everything we need to know. We were commenting before the session started that the warrant is somewhat shorter than it has been in other sessions, and there's a somewhat of an explanation for that Todd was briefing me on. So, but with that, I think although you probably know most of these folks, I see at least one new face. I'd like to use our usual custom of just quickly going through. We'll introduce ourselves. Please note whether you're a kind of a town meeting member as well, or maybe if you serve on other town committees, that would be useful to know. Let's start with Kathleen.
Morning, Jeff and Todd. Thanks for being with us. I'm Kathleen Donovan. I'm a 36-year resident of Natick. I'm on the Library Board of Trustees. I have not been a meeting of town member,
I sent you an
but
email. Did you see
as
it?
as a resident, both a resident and a board member, I'm very interested in what goes on at town meeting, and so appreciate your walking us through this morning.
Good
Thanks,
morning.
thanks, Kathleen. Rick.
Morning, Jeff and Todd. Rick Devereaux here. No introduction.
Good morning, Rick.
Right. Yeah. Everybody knows Rick. Jianqi.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for coming. I'm 26 years resident of Natick, and actually, this is the meeting when I learned most of things and news what's happening in my area. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I have a few friends through this coffee hours. Thank you for you, Doug and Sarah, to do this, and very excited about the today meeting.
Jianqi and I met through learning about making oxygen on Mars. First at the
Yes.
community center, and then here on Coffee with a Purpose. So there's no end to the range of topics we cover. Carrie.
Good morning, everyone. Got the usual suspects here. Nice to see you, Jeff. The whole former town meeting member, hearing that the warrant's a little bit shorter. Maybe I'll get roped back into joining once again, but we'll see. Life is 23-year resident. I'm involved in a whole bunch of stuff, and other people know. Keep Natick beautiful, repair cafe, Natick Rotary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So looking forward to hearing what's going on.
Thanks, Carrie. Bill.
Hi, Jeff and Todd. Welcome to Coffee with a Purpose. You both know me as chair of the Community Preservation Committee. I want to thank you for your service. Those are not easy jobs. I'm also active as a trail steward at Pekin Cove and active in my church. So welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Dee Dee.
Hi, Dee Dee Bergeron. I've never counted how many years I've lived here. So I moved here sometime in the 90s. And I am a member of the town Democratic Committee. I'm one of their members and pretty active in the church. I know some people here from that, and I think that's it.
Thanks, Dee Dee.
Recently retired public school teacher, and so now I'm free to attend things that happen in the mornings that on a weekday.
Sounds good. Glad to have you. Pat.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, nice to see you, Jeff.
Good to see you, Pat.
Pat Conaway, keep Natick beautiful.
Thanks, Pat. Carol.
Good morning, Jeff. Carol Berkowitz, and I've been over a 50-year resident of Natick and live on Lake Cochituate. And besides a number of things everybody's mentioned, Lake Cochituate has been a big, important lake to keep healthy. And thank you for coming this morning. Looking forward to hearing you.
Thanks, Carol. Tom.
Hi, good morning, Jeff and Todd. My name's Tom Daly. I'm a 35-year resident of Natick, former town meeting member, and welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Brinley.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Todd and Jeff, for being here today. Always get a lot out of this session on Coffee with a Purpose before spring annual town meeting and fall annual town meeting. I am a town meeting member. I'm also currently on the hybrid town meeting committee, and I'm grateful for you guys being here today. Thanks.
Thanks, Brindley. Sally?
Good morning. I'm Sally Hopkins, and I'm fairly new to Natick. I have been roped in by my brother Pat, so I'm keep Natick beautiful first. No, but I really enjoy our Coffee with a Purpose, and I look forward to hearing from you, Todd and Jeff, because the town meeting arrangement for a town is quite different than I'm used to in California. We always had mayors and that sort of thing. So really eager to hear all about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Catherine?
Hi, good morning. Sorry. Oh,
Yeah, we got you. Oh, there you are.
Just getting coffee. So,
Right.
Catherine Coughlin, Select Board, formerly ZBA, a current town meeting member. Something you may not know about me is I'm on my 102nd day of learning Portuguese in a row. So I'm planning to do some work with the Worker Center in Framingham and with immigrants who live there. So that's what's new with me.
In a row sounds like a Duolingo studier.
Oh, you put yourself on mute again.
Duolingo, Babbel for grammar, because Duolingo does not do well with, and then also Bluebird for vocabulary.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Triple strike. That's great. Cindy?
Good morning. Cindy Bates, just back from cleaning up on Union Street. I don't even get to my trail because of all the trash. So that's my thing right now, is keeping Natick beautiful.
Thanks, Cindy. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hanna. I've been on town meeting a long time, currently on the community preservation committee, and involved with Eco Natick, and like several people on this call, involved at First Congregational Church.
And I'm Doug, moderate this group and church volunteer. So again, Todd and Jeff, thanks for spending the time with us. And I'll just kind of turn it over collectively to the two of you. Everybody knows our kind of protocol for using the raise hand function. I'm assuming you guys are pretty much okay taking questions as we go, right?
Please, yeah. That'll make the time well spent. Quick introductions. Jeff Alderson, your town moderator. Can't believe it's been a year since I've been elected. It feels like the time either stood still or kept moving quickly. I don't know which. And so this will be my third session to moderate. I just to cover the bases, I've been in Natick 11 years, which is interesting, right? I jumped right into the town politics, and actually the first thing we did the first year we were here, my wife and I remember going door to door and helping get the word out about solar panels when we were doing the whole Solarize Natick project. That was our first introduction to the town. You've mentioned the church you all go to. I don't know what church that is. I'm uninformed.
Well, it's multiple churches, but those that have mentioned it, it's First Congregational on the north side of the common.
Okay.
But we've also got some Common Street folks here from the south side.
And I think somebody from the Lutheran Church as well.
Right. Oh, excellent. The reason I ask is one of the things that I brought back to town meeting was the practice of having an invocation to kick off the opening night of town meeting. So I'm always looking for additional churches to invite for clergy to do those things. We're set for this spring, but at least have a few more to invite to. And I'll give it over to Todd now for an intro.
Oh, okay. Todd Gillenwater. My wife and I have lived in Natick since the late 80s. I became a little bit more involved with town government probably in the 2005, 2006 range. So I'm currently a member of the Finance Committee and currently the chair. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to anybody who's interested in getting a little bit more information or getting prepped for town meeting.
Terrific.
And so let's jump into it. So I'm going to request that I can share slides or not slides with a website, and the reason for that is the best way to orient yourself to town meeting or our form of town government or who I am, if you're not familiar with it, is our town website, which is pretty good for all of the basics in terms of, what town meeting is. We create a web page for each session of town meeting to capture a lot of relevant information. So if you're a town meeting member or just a member of the public that's interested in what might come to the floor of any given session of town meeting, this is a good place to start. You can find this on the town website. If you go under government, under moderator, you'll see a few sites here. Everything that I'm going to show you today is under town meeting information. Todd and the committee manage the finance committee. The finance committee also has a sort of a working site they use for managing all their hearings and materials. That's linked from the finance committee page. And any other standing committee or appointed committee by the moderator would show up under here. And I'm glad Brinley's on the call. We have a committee that we'll be talking about this because it's on the warrant. The hybrid town meeting committee that was established last fall. Is anything that the work they're doing is also linked here as well. And if you go into the pages for each meeting, you can see the results from last fall. We'll be talking a little bit about that today as well, because there's some follow-on things that are happening this spring because of actions that were taken in the fall. But every page has its own entrance here. You'll notice just the basics of town meeting. It's at Kennedy Middle School. Based on our bylaws, it always starts on 7:30 p.m. on the first Tuesday. I figured it's the last Tuesday of the month. I figured how the bylaw actually states it. I should know this off the top of my head. It's Tuesday the 28th, and it's going to be at Kennedy Middle School in the auditorium. I go through the practice of sort of anticipating what the agenda is going to be each night of town meeting. As you know, depending on what business we pass or take up, or procedural motions that change the order of things, you might find that the agenda changes a little slightly. The reason I'm pulling up the agenda to share with you is this session of town meeting is kind of special. It's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. There is, in fact, we'll get to this. There's a citizen's petition about a resolution honoring such on our warrant. But outside of that, there's also some things that are going to be happening as part of the 250th celebration. There'll be a statement that I'm going to be reading that I've written from the perspective of the moderator and town meeting about what that means, what town meeting meant to the revolution and vice versa. Also, we're going to take some time to honor and memorialize Paul Connolly, who had passed away this spring. Paul Connolly was the moderator 2 moderators ago before Frank. I have feel some kinship for Paul. He was an Air Force officer, a captain, and a professional engineer, as was I. Interestingly enough, the moderator we had at the time of the American Revolution was also a military captain who went to the Battle of Bunker Hill. So there's some interesting. It's in the DNA or the pedigree or civic service of the military. It's something to say about that.
Are
So
you
we want to
saying we're
honor.
ready for a revolution, Jeff?
I don't want to say that, but other parallels could be made. Yeah, so that we have our typical opening ceremonies, but we also have some celebrations to make too. Also, there's going to be something special because it is the 250th. I asked the town clerk to raid the archives and bring some historical artifacts to the stage. So if you are a fan of local civics or actually national civics, we're going to have the actual Declaration of Independence that was read into the town meeting record in July of 1776 on the stage with us. Also, if you recall, last fall at town meeting, and I'm glad Bill's here, there was a vote that town meeting made. One of the many projects that we passed for the Community Preservation Fund was to restore the 1775 Battle of Bunker Hill muster roll that listed the men from Natick that went to battle for our nation. And that restoration has been completed, and so the actual muster roll will be on display at Kennedy as well that night. And so we wanted to do all those special things. We'll also have a copy of the Natick's resolve, what we did, our statement from town meeting that was actually read into the record, unanimously voted. One of the 60 towns that voted before the declaration was signed about our perspective in terms of town meeting and our rights being taken away through the intolerable acts of the time. So a lot of important things happening the first night of town meeting. Just to point out and orient you to this page, not to jinx it, but I think we can probably get town meeting done in two sessions. It's a short warrant, and we are proposing to use a consent agenda. We'll talk about that when we go through the warrant today. I'll mention what's on the consent agenda, and you might realize more things are on the consent agenda than not. And so if we do a good job of getting through the business, I don't expect we'll take more than two sessions, which is sort of if you want my opinion about how long it's going to go, it's baked into the calendar. So if you see the calendar session says if needed, that's the moderator's gut check about whether we need the sessions or not. Any information you need as a town meeting member or a member of the public is presented here. Everything from when the select board called the warrant all the way through motions that are being proposed by members or amendments, it's all going to be here. Like I said, the consent agenda is listed. The only document that's important but not yet present here is the Finance Committee recommendation book. That should probably be posted by the end of the day today. So if you use this link here to get to the main page, you'll have that. Then making this fully a meta type conversation, Coffee with a Purpose is one of the resources that we link to on these pages so that members of the public can get up to speed about what we're doing. I'm also linking to the Finance Committee's website for all of the minutes and files that in support of the hearings for each warrant article, all the standard documentation we have here to help town meeting members get up to speed. We are in the middle of recording primer videos, and yes, I'm getting practice. That's how you pronounce that. Primer videos. We have a couple of videos that are left to be recorded today with the representatives from our select board. And once those are done, all the videos will be broadcast on Natick Pegasus. Thanks to them for allowing us to record in the studios and to broadcast that. And all the videos will be listed here as well. And so all the sponsors can come in. It's sort of like a podcast style, kind of like this, but maybe a little more formal because you're in the studio. And with some slides that we kind of like interleave with our conversation. And so every sponsor has a chance to talk about what they're asking town meeting to do. And it was a really good discussion there. Bill also from CPC talked about their article as well. So that's the website. Let's get into the warrant. This is actually the recommendation book that has gone to print and is in the mail to members, but has probably not yet been received by members. And so I'll use this just to sort of run us through each of the articles. There are 18 articles on the warrant. There is one citizen's petition on the warrant, which is the resolution for the honoring of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. But other than that, it's pretty much business as usual. Todd, I'll let you say again for the record because I didn't hear the quote. What was your summary of why the warrant is shorter this time around?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different reasons for it. One of the main drivers and one of the things that town meeting spends a lot of time discussing and analyzing and opining on are things like zoning articles. And the planning board isn't sponsoring anything this session. They're working on things behind the scenes, the zoning bylaws and things like that, and they're not actually bringing anything forward. One thing that also might shorten it slightly is the Community Preservation Committee in the spring generally doesn't bring forward individual projects for town meeting to individually analyze. And when we get to their article, you'll see, or we'll discuss what relatively simple action they're requesting for this session. And one other thing is we did a lot as part of the override last session, or rather last spring, and so a lot of the spring business is not quite as involved this session.
Another observation is the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee has wrapped up their business last fall, and for about 6 different town meetings, we would have multiple articles and amendments or motions proposed by that committee, and that committee is no longer standing, so it's just shorter. So let's go through it. The things that are on the warrant are pretty typical suspects. So if you're an observer of town meeting annually, you'll see the same types of articles show up in the spring and the fall on a particular cadence. And so right out of the gate, one of those is what we call our easements article. And so Article 1 is to authorize the select board to acquire, obtain, abandon, or relocate easements. Easements, also known as taking a property, mostly for could be for like utility projects or transportation projects. This is a standing motion that the town meeting authorizes the select board to take these actions. It doesn't talk about any project specifically. It's just gives the select board that ability, and it's done as a favorable recommendation by the finance committee. I don't recall a time where this has even been debated in the past. It usually gets a pretty healthy vote. Todd, I'm going to do this cadence. We're going to practice our cadence. I'm going to describe it and then flip it back to Todd to see if there's anything in the finance committee that's noteworthy from the debate or the discussion from the hearing you want to say about this for Article 1. But anything noteworthy about Article 1 from your perspective?
Just a reminder for town meeting members, these are easements that don't have any cost associated with them. Since town meeting appropriates money, this is just the granting the ability for the select board to do stuff between town meetings that doesn't cost anything, but is important to keeping the business of the town going. Things like utility easements and that sort of thing.
That's it. I'm going to watch the chat as we go to see if there's any questions from folks that are on the call. I'm not seeing any raised right now, so we'll keep on trucking. Article 2 is another standing article that's on the warrant every year. Actually, I think every meeting we tend to have an article like this called the committee article. So any committees that are appointed or statutory in the town by the select board or others can have an opportunity to have a motion added here to present a report to town meeting. And then the way the motion language is written, sometimes the report is just to hear the report and we are informed and kept up to speed as a body about the work of that committee. Or sometimes you'll hear it say hear and discuss. That gives the town meeting the opportunity to actually discuss the topic being proposed and ask questions of the sponsor. In this case, we only have one committee presenting, but I love hearing this one. The Natick Net Zero Committee, they do some amazing work. So I believe the chair of the Net Zero Committee, Kate Mora, will be presenting at town meeting on this topic. A preview of that was shared at the Finance Committee. And Todd, anything else you want to say about Article 2?
No, as you noted, there's only one committee seeking to give a report under this article. There's a couple other places where multi-member bodies might speak to town meeting, but this is the only place. This is the only place that sort of is a catch-all for everybody else that doesn't have their own article.
Right, and we do have two other articles coming up. One for the hybrid town meeting committee, and then one for the turf study committee that want to present to the body. Article 3, this is the big one. This is our budget, and so every spring we vote on the way the article is written covers us to either do appropriations at the end of the fiscal year for the current fiscal year and to appropriate a budget for the next fiscal year. And this is just a standing article you'll see every year. This will describe our future budget. And if I move into the motions, you'll notice that the motions are split. There's actually 5 different motions under this, that each major section of the budget, we call the big budget, which is the combined sort of town operations, school budget, and shared services. That's under one budget. And then we have other smaller budget line items for various agencies in the town, like our golf course as an example. And each of those are broken out into different motions. And we can kind of go through each motion individually and talk about what the discussion was. Really, they were all unanimously favorable recommendations from the Finance Committee, with one exception, which is motion D, which we'll talk about, which has to do with reissuing of badges and patches for police uniforms. And we can talk about that. Doug and Sarah, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I think maybe you covered this. The main landing page for Springtown meeting on the town site, does that also include links to budget documents?
Not yet, but I will make sure they are added. Those are available on the town's website proper, under the town finance director's page. I think they are linked. I just have to do the cross-reference. That's a great suggestion.
Those are also on the finance committee's website, which is on the town moderator's landing page.
Yeah.
But we have the detailed school budget, the detailed revised town administrator budget, which just the revision was just printed. So those are the main documents which um, uh, just basically travel along with the Fincom book, as this is the complete set of things to be discussed and reviewed.
Yeah. And since we'll reference those for the details, I think for today's meeting I'll stay high level. I'm not really the best person to ask detailed line item questions about budgets. I will talk about one question that did come up at the finance committee to make sure people understand, because this also happened in a neighboring town in Wellesley. There was a discussion about whether it's possible to divide the budget into different questions at town meeting to talk about operations versus school committee. And the way our budget is presented under motion A, it's motion A actually, because of the way the budget's presented as a single sort of combined budget, it's not possible to divide the question as the budget's presented or accounted for. So that's that motion wouldn't be in order in our town meetings.
Audio.
So I'm going to go through each of the tables.
On audio too much if we keep the audio.
I'll let Martin mute. There we go. I'm going to go through each of the tables just to give you the top line numbers. So in case you're interested in what the questions are, our total education amount is just over 105 million. Our administrative budget, just coming this for administrative support, is about 9.5 million for different committees and commissions. You can see here as I'm just scrolling, public safety, just shy of 21 million. Health and community services, just shy of 3 million. Public works, 11.5 million. And then as we come here to this is probably a good table to show here, the shared services, talking about, like, you know, the way that we're doing budgeting and accounting across all departments across the town. That's sort of how it's displayed here. And you can see here that shared services is a pretty healthy, close to 62 million. So the number we're looking at is just shy of $212 million for the overall budget, just on motion A. That's the big one. And you can see here we include a table of where the sources of funds are for paying for that budget. You can see here if you're interested in where all of it's coming from. If people ask the question, where's the override going? That now shows up under the tax levy. So that's now 1 year later, it's rolled into what our ability is for tax levy. So you can see that here for tax levy for 2027. And this is the summary table here, which is, if you're keeping track, once you get the book, this is on page 49 of the recommendation book. We'll have the big table if you're interested in the breakdown by department. Just to quickly cover the other motions here, we have the enterprise funds like water and sewer and utilities, fringe benefits, those sorts of things. That gets its own motion here under motion B. You also notice there's the Sassamon golf course is listed here under motion B. And then each of these motions have their own tables about where it's coming from. And notice here we have actually user fees that sort of cover the costs for both of those budget items. Now we have some smaller motions under this article. The first is around providing for property tax audit. I was able to ask some questions of the town administration about this when we did the recording for some videos. This is for doing an audit for businesses that report personal property taxes. It's the ability just to check to make sure that that's being done correctly and properly. It's a relatively modest amount for that audit there. And then motion D, as I mentioned earlier, around replacement of police badges and uniforms. This is actually interesting because this is actually a follow-on to what happened based on a previous town meeting vote where we voted to change the town seal. And this is a downstream effect of that. While public works like changing logos on the sides of trucks or signage around town is being done as those things come out of service and be replaced, police uniforms, it's in the name, uniform, need to be done uniformly, right? So all of our police badges and uniforms and patches and markings all have to be done at the same time for consistency. And that estimated cost is 120,000. Worth mentioning, when we voted to change the town seal, there was a discussion. It's in the notes from that town meeting that this is actually right in the ballpark for what town thought this would cost when they proposed that. When we proposed that seal change in the past. Also, someone else will always ask the question, what about the fire department? The fire department doesn't actually have the old town seal built into their logos and their branding, so it's not necessary to change that for the fire department. And then motion E is around again, it's a separate article or separate motion for the golf course around upgrades because of things that have been happening in terms of persistent drought conditions and other equipment upgrades that are needed in terms of the water systems there. That's coming from the golf retained earnings for last fiscal year. I'm going to pause there and turn to Todd and see if I covered everything and if there's anything that I've missed from a finance committee perspective around the budget. This is the big one.
Yeah, no, that's a great summary. There are other major chunks of money which get moved around as part of other articles, things like stabilization funds and all of that. But this is the bulk of the appropriation requests for this year, and just between operating budgets and things like the stabilization funds and capital improvement, which is $7.5 million. We crossed the $250 million total appropriations. So it's a large and thriving community. So thank you, everybody that participates.
Checking the chat, checking the Q&A. I don't see anyone with a hand raised, and Doug, you'll keep me honest for that. Any questions around budgeting before we move on?
Yeah, just wondering about the stabilization funds. When will that be discussed? Is that discussed?
It's on the warrant. We will absolutely get there very shortly.
Okay.
Article 4.
Like that.
Okay.
Boom.
Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are you know your topic. I should hand out swag and gifts for people that do good segue questions. But Article 4 does speak to our stabilization funds and our OPEB fund. You'll notice here the article is written to cover 4 separate funds. Their definitions are listed here. Sometimes one of these referred to as our rainy day fund. We know capital because that allows the town to purchase capital equipment that might be larger than 1 year's worth of funding might need. So you can see here that these are just the definition of the funds here. OPEB in terms of our liability as the town to make sure we have money to cover our post-employment benefits amounts for employees. This one has very specific dollar amounts proposed to move into each of these funds, and you can notice that the source of funding for all 4 of these monies is coming from free cash from the last fiscal year. This is all being done as one motion, which is nice. We don't have to vote on each of these separately. That's actually a little bit of a change. I think in some past years we've voted on all of these independently, but we're doing one motion for all 4 of these at once. Todd, anything noteworthy from discussion around the funds or how the administration characterized where we are with balances?
Not a lot. The stabilization balances are solidly either at or slightly above the fiscal guidelines that the select board establishes. One of the recurring questions is, well, are we back to where we were before we needed to very legitimately spend money basically because of the COVID downturn? And in absolute dollars, yeah, we're pretty close to being back. In some cases, we're above where we were then. In terms of percentage of budget, we're also very, very close on everything. So we're we're making solid contributions to stabilization and future planning and capital reserves and things like that. So it's a healthy amount of money that we're setting aside.
Rick, did you ask where you're coming on Article 4 because you had a question about stabilization, and did we answer that for you?
No, I just wondered if it was going to be discussed separately, but I'd taken my eyes off your article sheet, so I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to keep on moving. Article 5 is a favorite of town meeting to talk about because, we have this sort of like cognitive dissonance about this concept of unpaid bills when we do such good budgeting process. Invariably, vendors get bills to us late, and those bills, if we receive them outside of the fiscal year for which it was budgeted, we can't pay them without a separate act of town meeting to pay for them. Here's the good news. We don't have any unpaid bills this year. It's not to say we won't ever have another unpaid bill in the future. I've talked with our Deputy Town Administrator for Finance, Ari Sky, about this. He says we've done a really good job of keeping track with our accounts payable. And not to say another vendor in the future might come in with a late bill, but this time there is no bill to be paid. So the Finance Committee recommendation here unanimously recommends no action. This will be on the consent agenda. I should take a pause here and say also on the consent agenda so far, if you're keeping track, Articles 1, 2, not 3, yes 4, yes 5. I'll keep that count going as we go. So for a consent agenda, I tend to include things that are unanimously voted by the Finance Committee, are relatively non-controversial, or are no action that really aren't going to have much for discussion anyway. And those things end up going on the consent agenda. And that consent agenda has been posted to our website as well if you're interested in the list of which articles and which motions specifically are in the consent agenda. Doug?
Yeah, so you mentioned the town had done a great job with accounts payable, contributing to there being no unpaid bills this time. Am I remembering correctly that either last town meeting or a recent session, folks kind of took issue with how large the number was and were calling into question procedural stuff? Maybe I'm imagining that.
No, it's a good question. So the summary I could say for last fall, there was an unpaid bill that was in excess of $30,000 for one vendor that had to do with the way that I believe the consulting services were paid for separately from a software services from a single vendor. And there was just a question about the billing, whether that was included or not. I forget the specific details, but that ended up coming in late. So it had to go on there. The rest of the other items on the unpaid bills motion was very small by comparison. That was most of the discussion there. And Todd, let me know if I've characterized that correctly. I think that was that. So there was really nothing around process. Again, it was one vendor with the discussion around that one vendor. There were a decent number. I think there were probably 20 other smaller bills that they looked back at. There was some, but if there was an issue with process, it's no longer there as far as this this data would tell us. Todd, anything else you want to say about Article 5?
Yeah, just at a high level, there's in an organization or operation which has 220 or $240 million of just invoices and stuff swirling through the system. Not to say that it's that, it gives you the impression that there's a lot of pieces of paper, there's a lot of vendors, there's a lot of participants, and invariably there's just with that amount of stuff, paper and electronic invoicing and stuff like that, invariably a vendor forgets to send something, or something gets marked as paid and it shouldn't have been. There's always a little pieces that sort of get broken during the system, and it's really not a huge process concern if a couple of things, if a vendor doesn't send a bill until the next fiscal period, there's really nothing that we can get done, but it's really not a reflection on the town.
Good.
Brinley, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I maybe more of a request. So I will be sharing this recording with new people, and I know we all kind of have a clue, but for people who maybe don't, I'm wondering if you could please, Jeff, explain if someone has a problem with consent agenda or concern, how would they pull something out of that on the town meeting floor? And then also, Todd, if you would just give normally we give or oftentimes in the past, we've given a quick overview of what free cash actually is and what it means, because free is such a strange word.
I remember it
Used to
from Monopoly.
describe free cash to describe what this is.
It is not free
For other
parking, no.
people, exactly. So just for other people who might watch this, since I know I will be sharing with a couple of brand new town meeting members this time. If you could explain those two things, that would be great. Thank you.
Todd, I'll let you go first while we're still on the article topic.
Okay. At a high level, free cash is, when you sit down and do your budget, you just, even as a household, you generally have a pretty darn good idea of what your income's going to be and what your bills are probably going to be. But a year out, you might not actually know to a high degree of precision exactly what you're going to get or exactly what you're going to spend. Free cash is really the summation of all the income that came in that was more than you thought it was going to be, or if you didn't spend everything that you budgeted for, that both of those things basically just drop to the bottom line in the following year. Once you budget something in a Massachusetts municipal government, that money's pretty much spoken for and segregated. So if you think you're going to get $100 of income, the system runs as if you're going to get that. If you get $120, you've got $20 more than you anticipated. The sum of all of those things becomes available and thus free to be used and reallocated the following fiscal year. So free cash is really just imprecision in the system. We collect more money than we expected, and we can budget conservatively, or we spend less. Yeah. Both of those are good things, but in aggregate, they can add up to what seems to be a very large number. But again, when you compare it to a $250 million worth of budgeting and analysis, it's really a relatively small number, but it's got commas in it, so yeah, people take that as a serious issue.
And from a town meeting perspective, we can't use that as an appropriation source until the state certifies how much free cash is left over after each fiscal year. The timing for that usually gets certified before the fall annual town meeting. I say usually. If it is certified, it's available for us to use, and you might see motions in the fall where they'll say the funding source is free cash. If it's not certified by fall town meeting, either those motions are held off or they identify other funding sources. Doug and then Bill.
Yeah, two things. One, I wanted to call attention to Catherine's comment in the chat that if a department overspends, then free cash gets dinged. So it's kind of where it ends up.
It's a net across the board
at the end of the year, which leads to a question of mine of just, does the town have a trend of typically at the end of the year generating free cash? Is it typically a positive or a negative number net at the end of each fiscal period?
I don't recall it's been a negative number.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult in Massachusetts to have a negative free cash number. Okay. Every budget line item except for snow and ice removal, you can't overspend. It's just not allowed. You can't appropriate more than you budget, or you can't spend more than you appropriate the year before. So snow and ice is the exception, but as the moderator mentioned, I've never seen anything in Natick which has approached either a zero free cash and certainly not a negative free cash.
Bill?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Todd if that was typical. To me, I did the numbers. It looks like it's between 2 and 3% of the budget, which seems pretty reasonable to me. But since you just mentioned that, what about overtime for police and fire? Is that also excluded, or they have a cushion?
Overtime is budgeted. So it's not unexpected. It's just a different line item. So if there were some sort of emergency and we needed to budget police and fire, or need to spend money on police and fire that was completely outside of the previous appropriation, the town has a reserve account that we have a public hearing on, and they present the unexpected need. But things like overtime and all of that's all pretty closely budgeted and tracked in the appropriation request.
And Catherine?
I just wanted to, when you were talking about like what makes up free cash, so this year on the town side, town budget, because of the hiring freeze and a number of budget cutting measures that we implemented, we turned back 2.6 million. So on the school side, shared services kind of ends up netting about equal, and on the school side, there are historically very little turnbacks. So in terms of unspent money, that's where a lot of it goes. I mean, a lot of it comes from, and then of course there's the other things that Todd alluded to, and yes, there's never been anything approaching negative free cash that I've seen in 20 years of following this.
So just to keep on going, I'll answer the question about the consent agenda. I've left this up for a while, so if you've got bored and we're reading this, this is what's called the consideration of use of consent agenda motion. This is on the town meeting website. It's also it's pretty standard in terms of our rules, but we have to propose a motion at town meeting, and we vote this motion at town meeting that says we're going to use a consent agenda. This is not the consent agenda. We're setting up the rules for the consent agenda. So when Brinley asked the question, if I don't like what's on the consent agenda, how do I hold an article from the consent agenda? This describes that process. And basically, when we go open up town meeting, I'll go through the proposed list of articles for the consent agenda, which is I'll summarize that at the end once we get through the whole warrant. I go through each article in turn, and I wait and I pause and I let the members decide whether that's good to go. And the way that we do that is if I see 7 or more members rise to be recognized, they want to call out a hold on that article, we will take that article off the consent agenda and handle it in the usual manner. Anything that survives that process is the consent agenda, and then we take one vote on that consent agenda. What I'll say about the proposed consent agenda motion, as a moderator, in order for this to be in order, I have to propose what the consent agenda itself will be. That is in the recommendation book. So I've already provided Todd my take on that. It is also a requirement that the moderator, the finance committee chair, the town clerk, and town council review the proposal, what's going to be on the consent agenda, and I take their feedback under advisement, and we go for it. The consent agenda is pretty healthy this year because as you'll see as we go through this, there's not a lot of controversial things left. And if I think that and I only take unanimous recommendations from the finance committee, I have rules that I do not put zoning on the consent agenda. I do not put unpaid bills on the consent agenda unless it's no action, because unpaid bills require a 4/5 vote. And when you do a consent agenda, you have to have the quantum of vote match the most restrictive vote quanta. And so if I put unpaid bills on there, the consent agenda would have to pass by 4/5, which is a high bar. Same for zoning, would be 2/3. So our consent agenda motion is purely a majority vote. Doug?
So that's the process for removing items from the consent agenda from the floor. Is there a similar process for adding?
That's my call.
Okay.
So the body of what's actually proposed for the consent agenda is the moderator's discretion. And so I have my sort of rubric for you don't have to guess what I'm going to put on the consent agenda. Anything that's a no action, I'm putting on the consent agenda. If there's multiple motions under an article and the finance committee recommendation is split, where they might recommend 4 motions but not a 5th, I will not put that on the consent agenda. We'll vote each motion separately. I will not put zoning. I will not put unpaid bills that require a positive vote. I do pay attention to what I consider to be controversial topics, meaning that town meeting members have expressed a general interest in debating a topic. That might also be what the tenor of the discussion was at Finance Committee. In terms of putting things out for I will not take away the ability to debate anything or even be suspected of taking away the ability for debating something if I think if it's not something we typically would have put on a consent agenda, or if it's something that the town meeting traditionally wants to debate. Capital projects is another great example. Even if there was a unanimous recommendation from the Finance Committee for capital funds, which we're going to get into, I don't put that on the consent agenda because we love talking about our trucks at Natick. It's something I've learned that it's just a topic that we like to go into the detail on, whether it's electric or how long does it take to get a fire truck these days, which is 3 years, I'm telling.
So I get that it's your call, but does that also mean then that you've made that assessment prior to opening the session, and would
in
would
fact
you
I
not
have to make
take deliberation or questions from the floor on would you consider adding something?
So, good question. So, if you read these rules here, notice it says I have to provide in the recommendation book at least 7 days prior to the opening of town meeting.
Okay.
So what this means is I have to give notice of what the consent agenda is going to be to the town, and so I have to meet that bar. So what this means is it's printed and it's in the book. If the members don't like what the moderator's proposal is in this motion, their option is to call out a hold. The other thing I use to go into this is I attend, and I don't know if this is tradition or whatever, but I'm following a tradition. I attend every finance committee meeting, regardless of what the topic is, because I want to hear what the discussion, the debate is at the finance committee. I want to know what went into the discussion, where the sponsor's at, and I try to make sure the consent agenda is not controversial. We have last year as an example in the fall, and we got really good feedback in the fall of using a consent agenda. People really liked it. It does a couple of things. It makes town meeting more efficient. For the things that are not controversial, we can do it in a single vote. It moves the meetings right along. Examples of things we put on the consent agenda last fall, like hearing committee reports. If the finance committee recommended we want to hear a report from the committee, why do we need to vote on it again? Put it in the consent agenda. We established the hybrid town meeting committee through the consent agenda last fall. It felt like no one really, the finance committee had unanimous recommendation, and we didn't do that. I also think in the fall, people did exercise their call out for hold. There was one article that was removed from the consent agenda, and I think it had to do with a bylaw change that was recommended by the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee, if I'm getting that correct. So our town meeting members do know the process and do participate well. And I would take feedback up until my 7-day deadline. Absolutely. If someone says, please don't put that on the consent agenda, if it was a sponsor, I would absolutely take the sponsor, discuss, even if they had a favorable recommendation to finance committee, I would take the sponsor's call and say, I really want town meeting to have the value of debate. I would take that recommendation as well. Or anyone from the public can reach out to me anytime for any reason. I would take that feedback. But
thanks for clarifying that, because I guess in my mind, the fact that it can go in one direction, it can become kind of opaque's the wrong word here, but less opaque at time of town meeting, but can't become more opaque at the last minute, speaks to the principle of kind of full disclosure and timely again, disclosure is the wrong word, but keeping the public and town meeting well informed ahead of time.
Yeah. And that's why we have a good dialogue with council and the finance committee chair and the town clerk and myself about what could or should go on the consent agenda. Sometimes I'll make a proposal and then someone will say that's not a good idea, and we'll go back and forth. So I don't think I've ever not taken feedback. Let's get right back on the list here. So I think we've wrapped up Article 5. Article 6 is our public access cable fund. So this basically is town meeting voting to move money that was already collected and given to the town through fees on your cable bill, and that goes into a fund, and then we move that to basically Natick Pegasus to allow them to carry out their operations. Todd, you are still on the, I believe, the cable and advisory board for the town. Anything else you want to say about this this article?
Just my recurring reminder that I also make to the finance committee and put in the book. The source of these fundings are subscribers. What I pay to Comcast or Xfinity includes a whole list of fees. One of those fees goes to the town, which then gets aggregated and then goes to Pegasus. Since the source of the funding is people with cable subscriptions, hard cable coming to your house, streaming doesn't count. So as cable subscriptions, as that model changes and people subscribe to cable less and stream more, this is a diminishing funding source.
Yeah.
So in order to keep the good works of Natick Pegasus going, the town sort of in the mid and longer terms needs to recognize that cable subscriber fees are not going to be a long-term solution to funding Natick Pegasus. So it's a medium to longer terms conversation, but it's something that the town should start discussing.
This came up in our primer video recording as well.
Oh, good.
And I quoted you exactly because I'm guilty as charged. I actually cut our cable bill out entirely this month, finally, and we are now a full streaming household. So Ari Sky mentioned that there is some legislation being talked about at the state level to possibly have a fee added to streaming services to backfill this and look at other sources of funding. So it's not to say the town has to find another well to tap, but this is going to be a diminishing fund over time. Article 7, revolving funds. So we have two articles on the warrant related to revolving funds. One is a bit of a cleanup job for our bylaw to actually replace the language in the bylaw with more of a table display of the same information that better describes what our revolving funds are. There is no additional funds being proposed or removed as part of this cleanup. It's basically just to make this part of the bylaws much more easier to read and understand. That was passed through with a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee. I'm not going to put too much time into this other than I'll display this and show you what I'm talking about. This is an example. Sorry if it's a little blurry on my resolution here, but this gives you an idea of what the new tables of information might look like in the bylaw if this were to pass. You could see the name of the fund, who's its sponsor, where the source of the monies, what's the activity they do, any restrictions on those funds, any other requirements reporting has to do, and then how it's managed on a fiscal basis. So, Todd, anything about Article 7? Am I characterizing this correctly?
There's I believe the Conservation Commission has a previously approved revolving fund that gets added to the list, but the main thrust of this particular motion is a much cleaner and understandable presentation for everybody that's interested. The table format is much easier to understand.
And the definitions for the tables are included in the new text here as well. I encourage anyone that's interested in seeing what funds there are to read the proposed new tables. And so while Article 7 is just a cleanup of the presentation of the information about the funds, Article 8 is actually about appropriating monies into those funds so they can be used. And so this motion is also done in sort of a table form, and I think I'll scroll here so you can see it. This is the proposal by fund for which funds would get which monies. I think the ones to point out here, if I were trying to recall from my discussions with the finance director, I think the recreations and parks is high. because that revolving fund is paid for with fees for use of different town facilities for programs, summer programs, things like that. And I think that was the only one that he had called out, which because you see that $2 million and you might have a question about it. Todd, anything that we might want to say from the Finance Committee's perspective in terms of the
Yeah,
funds and the amounts?
Yeah, just a minor clarification. This we're not actually appropriating money. We're not taking town,
That's
for
right.
example, tax levy, and spending it in one of these categories. These just set limits. Revolving funds are funds that are collected generally from participants in a program or mitigation funds or something like that. So these are just basically the annual spending limits of those um, the revolving funds in, for example, if you think of the libraries, the library collects various funds and fees and can spend it on all sorts of different things. These limits just establish what the total spend can be, but these aren't necessarily town funds per se.
Moving right along. Article 9 is a favorite article for discussion and debate by members, so it is not on the consent agenda. Articles 7 and 8 are on the consent agenda. And Article 9 around capital equipment and improvement. This has multiple motions for different purposes and projects. What I would say here about the capital program is again, Todd, make sure I'm getting this right. I'm getting practiced at this. Our capital program is like a 5-year program where the town prioritizes projects over time based on need and funding source availability. And that when they look at it on an annual basis, we're looking at, I want to say it was close to 7 million total in funding asked for capital projects for the spring, and there might be a smaller amount proposed for the fall. Am I getting close to that on the total dollar amount being asked for by the town on the annual basis? And Burnley has put a link to the actual capital improvement program. Thank you in the chat. And so if we look at each of the motions individually, you'll see here that there is under vehicles and equipment, just close to $4 million there for some relatively big ticket items here for DPW. And then there's a table that's always included for each of these to see which item is for which amount. Motion B, more around again DPW parks facilities. You'll see there's quite a bit of replacements going on here. I also want to point out this term is showing up now in some of the motions in the language. Pay-go, pay-as-you-go. It might be written in a lot of different ways. It's also, it's just, I asked Ari Sky for a definition of this. It's basically all sorts of things that are equivalent to cash. It could be free cash, but it could also be money's already, appropriated for that purpose. Todd, anything else you want to say about the pay-go terminology? Because I think there was a question at Finance Committee about this term as well. It's not totally familiar to town meeting members.
Yeah, the question comes up because it's new and it's different. Free cash kind of has a statutory meaning. This might typically have been labeled free cash. That has a statutory meaning. This is really just cash from all available sources that's not otherwise allocated to some other appropriation. So it's paying as we go in the form of cash. It's not borrowing. It's not something more directly attributable to a state funding program or something like that. This is just cash which isn't otherwise being applied to something else.
Okay. And motion B is around the golf course.
Yeah.
And there's a list
a lot of these are separate motions because they have separate funding sources.
Correct.
Enterprise funds, for example, the golf course or water and sewer, That's not paid out of town funds per se. User fees, people who buy water from the system or who play rounds of golf. Those are the funding sources. The other split is typically cash or other sources versus borrowing. Borrowing has a separate quanta of vote that's required to appropriate money which is going to be borrowed.
And while the numbers might be considered for some a boring topic, this is the only part of the recommendation book that has pretty pictures. And so if you want to see what we're buying, and this is included for reference, it is not part of the motion. The motions are really just the amounts and the purpose. But if you're interested in what that money is going to get you, there's a really good tens of pages worth of detail on that. Brinley.
I know we usually save our input and conversations for later, but I always feel compelled at this moment to say that I am very impressed with our TPW and our trucks and our guys who run the trucks, and they take really great care of them. And when they need them, they really do need them because they really do take a pounding. And so I'm always happy to see these pretty pictures. And I'm almost always in support of their requests.
Yeah, glad to hear it. Moving along, Article 10, collective bargaining, also known as our union contracts. This is currently set we see this, when there's a contract being negotiated. Right now, the only contract that's still, the only union that's currently running without a contract, Todd, tell me if I'm wrong, is our fire department. I believe this is the only thing that's outstanding. The town put this article on the warrant, thinking that the negotiation would be done in time for the Finance Committee hearings and town meeting to vote on this. It is not. So they don't have a contract yet. So there is no motion here. So the only motion you see under this article is a motion of no action, and therefore this will be on the consent agenda. Article 11 is our personnel board classification and pay plan. These are also known as like our pay tables in our bylaws. There's two tables that list the grade and sort of classification system for both salary and hourly employees, as well as lists of job titles that fall under each of those categories. Every year, as we change the job titles and definitions of those positions, or we look at what the salary amounts are and the needs are for those positions, we might shift those job titles into those categories a little bit. And this includes in the Finance Committee recommendation book a redlined version of the changes. What I want to point out is the tables themselves have no changes. So this year, and unlike years past, there are no changes to the grade and levels for salary ranges or hourly ranges on the table definition. The only changes that are being proposed are to some job titles being removed or moved between grades, or some of the job titles just being changed. And all those annotations are done in red line in the recommendation book. Todd, did I miss anything about the pay tables?
No. And even if there were changes in the tables for pay grades and things like that, this motion or this article doesn't appropriate money. This is just the framework by which the town administration works. So any changes that would happen even within pay grades here, all of that is debated and appropriated in the budget articles. This is just really just the framework article.
A couple of years ago, just because it's sort of town meeting related, a couple of years ago, you might recall that we did debate the tables themselves. I'm going to point out here the lowest minimum grade one we have here. Our minimum wage in the town of Natick is $15. That's a topic that comes up sometimes, and that was discussed and debated and changed a couple of years ago. All right. So moving along. There's actually a memo from the town that's included about the pay plan in terms of the discussion around the changes to that. If you're interested, that's in the recommendation book. So I'm going to discuss articles. Am I at 11 yet? No. Yes, I'm at Article 12 now. I'm going to discuss Articles 12 and 13 together because they are sort of related, but particularly how they were discussed at the Finance Committee. Articles 12 and 13 are an act asking for a change to a contract extension, which is sort of an exception for state statute for mandatory retirement ages for our chief of police and our deputy chief of police. The mandatory retirement age is 65. Without this exception, this language of this article in motion is modeled on what other towns have done to get these sorts of approvals done in the past. Just demographically speaking, this isn't personal and identifiable information, but for the purpose of this, it turns out that our chief and our deputy chief are within 1 day of age of each other. And so their mandatory retirement ages are pretty effectively the same date. And that puts the town in an interesting spot in terms of hiring for a new chief and the time it takes to do that. Todd, I'll let you, if you want to characterize the discussions or the points of debate at the Finance Committee, I'll let you handle that because there was some discussion for these two articles that resulted in differences of recommendations. To point out here, Article 12 actually has no recommendation from the Finance Committee. I'm showing you what the results of the vote were. As you know, we have 15-member Finance Committee. We need to have, at a minimum, 8 members vote favorably on to get a recommendation of favorable action. There is none for Article 12. And then Article 13 is actually a little different. This one actually was marked as refer to sponsor. So for Article 13, the Finance Committee actually did not want to proceed with this motion as presented. Todd, do you want to characterize the discussion? I know the details are in the minutes from the Finance Committee and also the write-ups here for these motions. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, the general discussion. Well, first, the differences between the two outcomes between these two things is mostly the order in which they were discussed. We sort of debated them concurrently, and we had sort of the general ideas that these things were pretty similar. And once we went through the process of hearing the first one, we kind of knew where we were heading for the second one, which is why they have slightly different outcomes. But the general gist of the conversation at the Finance Committee was, what are the long-term plans for how we are going to staff up the police department? What are some of the concerns of having both the chief and the deputy chief basically not, the deputy chief is not really a succession plan for the chief because they have the same retirement age. The long-term plan, I think, was to have a different set of candidates available to assess, and for various reasons that hasn't panned out. So the town's in the position of having both the chief and the deputy chief coming up on retirement, and then the question is, how quickly do you think you can hire a brand new chief and a brand new deputy chief, and how should the town approach succession planning? So it was a robust conversation on town administration and strategic planning and how the town should be doing succession planning across all different departments. So that's generally how we got to the votes that are in the book.
Doug, you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to allude to something Brinley said earlier and remind the audience here and participants that the focus of today's session is to learn what all these articles are, and also in particular how Fincom has come to their recommendations, but not for us to kind of debate the pros and cons. We have a separate session 2 weeks from now for us to argue pros and cons of whether we support this or any other warrant article. So just a pinch off.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification. And you're a great moderator, I should say, Doug.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause here because, all right, I'm gonna do a little personal plug. The state legislature finally passed our home rule petition for some bylaw changes that we had asked for 2 years ago at town meeting. And what that means, if you know your civics and what the next step is, the next step is to have a ballot question put to the town to accept the charter changes. The reason I'm bringing that up is one of the things that's been changed or proposed was the ability for the town moderator to appoint a deputy. I still cannot. And so that's still on hold until the town gets a ballot question. And the vote of the state legislature didn't happen. The Senate didn't vote to accept it until the window had already closed for our most recent spring election. So I'm not going to speak for anyone who might be from the select board on this call asking for a special election just for our charter change. I don't think that's likely to happen. So we might not be looking at those to be accepted until a ballot question is posed next spring, because we will not. I don't believe we'll be having a ballot question on our fall election, based on what the town clerk is telling me, but the rules are for this fall. So in case somebody was interested in what the outcomes or where we stand with our home rule petition, passed, but ballot question is next. Brinley, you have your hand up for another question.
Yes, it's just a comment to tag on what you guys are all saying, that to do homework for asking questions for the next session, or to understand everything that you guys have all just been referencing. I did put a link in there for Pegasus. All of the Fincom meetings can be watched on Pegasus, and I put a direct link to those. And usually those are listed on the Fincom page. I'm not sure if they'll get posted this time or not, but at least they're in the chat. So if you're curious how all the conversations went, you can just watch Fincom.
Thanks, Brinley. Trucking right along, Article 14 is a bylaw change. It's Article 50 of our bylaws, Section 16, around animal control. My understanding of this one is that the animal control officer and the Natick police are looking for a better clarification in the bylaws to set an expectation to someone they might ask a question about the vaccination status of their animals in terms of that person's ability to produce said documentation. And so that's sort of really the purpose of the article. Unanimously favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee. If you're interested in the specific details listed for the terminology and the changes being proposed, you can see the entirety of the proposed new section listed here in the motion. Todd, any other color on this one?
No, it's relatively straightforward, and in many ways it's adopting sections of already existing state law. So,
and this one will be on the consent agenda. Article 15 is the Community Preservation Fund. It's the article in motion to propose which funding sources are going to be filled under the different categories of accounts for the Community Preservation Act. Again, unanimous favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee. And you can see here the motion includes the movement into putting in the statutory amount of I think actually Bill's on the call. He could actually maybe speak to it a little bit as well. The amounts that go into the administrative fund, and also one of the things about the administrative fund that Bill and I talked about when we recorded our prim review video for Pegasus was the idea of hiring some staff or shared staff to help to administer the activities of the committee and the funds. And I know we've got the benefit of Bill being here. Anything else you want to say to this item?
Just that $73,000 is 5% of the projected income.
That's it.
And I'd also say that any money that's not spent returns to the pool and goes back in to be spent for other projects.
All right. And so that's Article 15, and that Article 15 will be on the consent agenda. Article 16 is an article that was asked for by the Hybrid Town Meeting Committee. So again, the Hybrid Town Meeting Committee was established through a vote of town meeting last fall. It has its own sort of 8-point charter, which is on our town website. I was a sponsor for establishing that. It's appointed by the moderator. We have a member from the committee on the call today as well. And basically, they've been doing a lot of great work. Besides the finance committee, this is the other committee that I attend every meeting. I try to be a resource to them and to stay up to speed because I probably have the most vested interest in this. The committee is asking the way the article is written, they are asking for an extension because currently their charter has turned into a pumpkin on June 30th, and they're asking for an extension to continue their great work. They've had probably 16 or 17 meetings at this point, and they do want to make a report out to the town. So motion A is to hear and discuss their report. They have a draft report out that they want to do, some PowerPoint slides to go with that. And so we're going to hear from the committee on that if that motion passes. And then the separate motion, which is to extend the term of that committee. I do also believe that Article 16 is actually, I have to check on this one because the recommendation quantum was what it was not unanimous. I don't think I put this on the consent agenda, but I'm gonna pull the consent agenda up before the end of the call today to verify that. Todd, I don't know if there's much else in terms of color on this one. They're not making a formal recommendation as to whether we should do a hybrid meeting or not. That's usually the first question. Are they done their findings? No, they're not done their findings. You may have seen a survey they did about polling the town and polling the town administration and polling town meeting members about our thoughts and feelings about the hybrid town meeting and what that might mean for participation going forward. I've seen the preliminary data and it's interesting, but they're not ready to issue any sort of findings or report yet. So there's no formal report being issued. So the questions will probably be more about what work they've done and what's left to do. Todd, anything else from the Finance Committee's perspective?
Just as a point of information, each of these motions had two members who abstained. Those members are members of the hybrid town meeting committee and just chose to abstain, just to recuse themselves.
Thank you for pointing that out.
What a great concept.
Moving on. Article 17 is around the Natural and Synthetic Turf Field Study Group report. This is a select board sponsored article, and this study group is, I believe, appointed by and by the select board directly. This is not included in our standing article for committees because there was a question as to whether this study group would be included in that definition. So they actually asked for their own article so that they could make their own report. Otherwise, it's very similar in terms of the recommendation to hear and discuss a report of this group. The sponsor feels that it's important that town meeting gets an update on the work of this activity, in no small part because if this sounds familiar, the last action that town meeting made in the fall of 2025 was to do an advisory vote on a moratorium for 3 years to do no work to build an artificial turf in the town of Natick. This committee or this study group is really chartered to bring together available science and information and facts to present to town meeting in the form of a report. Again, very similarly, they do not have a final report done. They have no recommendation to make. They're just going to be providing an update on their activities to date. I think I'll let Todd speak to this, but this one was interesting coming through the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee voted twice on this one. The first time there was no recommendation, and then it was brought up for reconsideration. And then the second time there was still no recommendation. You can see the outcome of the vote here. Todd, if you want to speak on the debate and discussion from Finance Committee.
Yeah, similar outcomes for the two times that we heard it, the second time under reconsideration. The speaking to the second time that we heard it, the reason that, or the major discussion points on and how we did not get to the 8 votes as the threshold is some committee members were concerned or took note of the fact that It's not a final report. It's an interim report. Was there really going to be enough information to warrant spending the time and things like that? So it wasn't the opinion that it's an unimportant issue. It's certainly an important issue. It's just whether or not we thought it was the time at this particular session of town meeting to go through the whole issue, or whether or not it would be a better use of everybody's time when there was a little bit more advanced if the committee were a little bit further along in their study and decision process. The first time through, the committee, the finance committee, got a little bit sidetracked and bogged down about the contents of the report or the composition of the study committee or the working group, and that's just not our purview. So that's why we came back and did a reconsideration. So,
Pat, you have a question, sir. You're muted, sir.
The artificial turf thing, has maybe the group hasn't had time, but I mean, there are other communities that are trying to figure this out. I was just curious if they're going to be checking with some of them.
A good question for the sponsor. What the finance committee did not get into, and what I've tried not to do also is I don't really know anything about the contents of their work or their report. This is purely just whether town meeting will vote to let them speak at town meeting and to allow town meeting members to ask them questions. So a couple things I would point out about that. Anyone is welcome to reach out to this committee to ask questions anytime. So my first thing would say, don't wait till town meeting. If you've got a question about what the work they're doing and the findings they're making and the data they're including or not including, reach out to them directly, share your information with them, or ask those questions. I'm sure they would love that feedback. Second is, if town meeting votes to pass this motion, the way it'll work is they'll make their report in the usual way from the podium. They'll have 10 minutes or less, and then town meeting members can ask their questions 10 minutes or less. And so if you have questions for the committee then after hearing their report, you can ask those from the floor of town meeting. Even as a member of the public, you can speak to this. But there's really no action. There's no vote on the contents. There's nothing before town meeting that has to do with any votes under this. I did ask that question as the moderator at the finance committee hearing. I don't even know if I asked it as a question. I more stated as fact that there's no vote in front of town meeting related to capital projects or turf fields. It's not in the budget. The moratorium does not prevent town from maintaining existing fields. So there's nothing in front of the town to act on. This is simply to have that study group present a report at town meeting and allow town meeting members to ask questions about it.
I guess what I was also asking, though, because implied in the what we're trying to do with artificial turf fields, there's definitely finance and cost factors, and I thought that would have to go through
There is nothing presented to the town in terms of cost. There is no project in front of the town. This is purely to hear a report from this group. And so if the town eventually in the future were to make any proposals for any projects, that would come through the typical budgeting or capital project, but there is nothing in front of the town related to any sort of costs. Burnley, you have a question?
I just wanted to let Pat know that when we as a group in 2 weeks are discussing all of this, that several of us have been going to those meetings and are happy to share what we can about where we think they are and what they've been doing, Pat. So not trying to leave you hanging. Maybe we'll be able to answer some of your questions in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. I think that's right. So
I see Rick and then Donna.
Yeah, and I do want to keep in mind that we are at 10:30, and Todd and Jeff have been very gracious with our time, but one more article and any wrap-up comments.
We'll wrap up pretty quick.
Yeah. So Rick.
No, Brinley asked my question. I don't need to. Thanks.
Yep.
Great. Donna.
Was this committee formed by the select board? I thought that it wasn't voted on by the select board. Does anybody know?
Catherine, you probably have an answer to that question.
It was not formed. It's not a select board committee. It was formed by school administration, town administration, school committee, and the select board, which decided to approach the question together and nominated people to sit on this committee, which sits independently as an ad hoc committee, and it's led by a former school committee member, Julie McDonough, who had done some work on this while she was on the school committee. I'd encourage anyone who has any questions about the committee and its work and whether they've looked at cost or if they've reached out to a certain source or health reports, please contact Bruce Evans directly. He's been fielding all the questions sent to the select board, and he has like multiple paragraphs he can copy and paste and send, or just answer specific questions. And he's very happy to do that.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank
So
you.
let's just wrap up. Article 18, our last article, is our only citizens petition. It's from a gentleman you may know, Josh Ostroff, and others that have helped inform this. This is a resolution to honor the 1776 Natick Resolve for Independence. That was the statement of town meeting at the time in terms of it being in favor of declaring independence, and that's actually already in our town meeting records. It's actually the document I mentioned earlier that'll be at town meeting to honor the event, and to uphold the United States Constitution in 2026. That's also a second very important part of this article. The motion that you see here is a text of a resolution. And so the first thing I want to address as a town moderator is this is, if you know, our bylaws were changed a few years ago that our resolutions that the town makes can only be done as sort of like our ceremonial, unanimously voted on with a hand vote at the beginning of town meeting, if it is is not a non-controversial, but like a more of a celebratory, congratulatory type of motion. So we're kind of restricted in terms of what motions might be done in that method. So for everything else, there's a warrant article. And so the sponsor did ask for a warrant article to allow for debate and discussion around the content of the proposed motion. And that's important. I talked with the sponsor. I talked with Josh when we were recording the primer videos this past week. I think the Natick Historical Society director said it succinctly, which is it's in the spirit of what town meeting did 250 years ago to allow town meeting to debate and amend the content of this motion as presented. It couldn't be a better homage to what we did 250 years ago. And so what you're seeing here is proposed by the sponsor. The vote from the Finance Committee was favorable. This is not on the consent agenda, so as to honor that spirit of debate and discussion. But the resolution is here. I'm sure the sponsor would be more than happy to answer questions about the content of the motion. Todd, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about the Finance Committee discussion on the motion and the resolution.
Just a general observation that kind of runs through all the Finance Committee discussions and deliberations is the Finance Committee, much like town meeting, has a fairly broad variety of opinions and people with all sorts of different views. And much like town meeting enjoys debating and wordsmithing and challenging the assumptions of people that come before it, Fincom does the same thing. So if you watch some of the Fincom hearings, you'll see that robust debate is part of the process. This is where the committee landed with the sponsor on what was getting brought forward, and the Finance Committee is really saying we recommend that the discussion move from the Finance Committee to the floor of town meeting, and let's all participate in local democracy.
And to that point, I want to point out something else here. Like we might be used to, when you hear the word resolution in town meeting, you tend to think unanimous hand votes and lots of applause. This resolution being on an article as a citizen's petition does not require a unanimous vote to pass. And just going to leave that out there, be as it may. That's your warrant. And so if you're keeping track at home and doing the scores, this is what the proposal is currently for the consent agenda. And I'm going to zoom in on the language here. This is the important bit at the top. So when I publish in the recommendation book a consent agenda motion, it's sort of appending all of the motions of the articles that I'm recommending in sort of one document, so that you can see this together. If we vote, all these things is what we're voting on in one vote. And this is the numbering of what's being included on the consent agenda. And if you are doing the math, that's over 2/3 of the current warrant on the consent agenda. Until members rise to change it or modify it, that's the proposal. With that, I think we're done for our discussion. Doug, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much. Just one last quick question. Have you received any communications or requests from people to take any of the other warrant articles out of sequential order?
Yes. So the only procedural motion that's been discussed, and I'm expecting from the floor, is actually to move Article 18, which is the resolution, to the first order of business on the first night of town meeting. Now, I'm not going to try to speak in favor for or against, but I think the rationale for that is sort of obvious. We're going to have a lot of historical artifacts on display, the actual copy of the text of the resolution that the motion is meant to honor and celebrate is going to be on the stage. It felt appropriate that the sponsor wants to talk about it while all of that accoutrement is on display. Take it as you will. It's up to town meeting to vote that procedural change, but that's the rationale.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So again, I want to thank the both of you for spending this time. This has been super informative and helpful, and I'm glad you're going to be putting a link to the video when it's done out on the town site, because I would guess that anyone in the town that takes the time to listen to this would be much better prepared to attend town meeting. As Brindley's mentioned a couple of times, in 2 weeks, our session the day before town meeting convenes will be a coffee with a purpose internal session, so to speak, where we get to kind of debate pros and cons of any of these motions.
Can I ask, say one last thing? So I remiss if I didn't say this earlier. Annual tradition after our town election, I like to hold an orientation session for new town meeting members. That orientation session is tomorrow night, April 14th, 6:30 p.m. at Kennedy Middle School. That's linked to on the town meeting page. There's a letter that's going out from the Finance Committee. There's a paragraph on that letter that actually announces the orientation session, try to get as many people to attend. That's for new members and existing members that might want a refresher on the content. I've updated the orientation program for members to reflect Town Meeting Time 4, because if you recall last fall, we did vote to adopt Town Meeting Time 4 as the book of the meeting. And so I do encourage people to attend that if you're newly elected, or just want to meet your new members and talk before town meeting starts.
Great. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for your time this morning. I was saying to Sarah at one point, this particular session each time you guys come just reminds me, it just amazes me that the two of you are volunteers. The amount of work that not only you, but your committees and really the full town volunteer corps goes through to run our town is truly impressive. As a segue, we always close with kind of current events, and I'll mention that. So one thing first, next week, just a reminder, we will not be having Coffee with Purpose because it's Marathon Monday and Patriots Day. And we'll all be cheering on Pat Conaway, who will be amazingly running the marathon. So kudos to Pat. Best of luck to him. And in terms of current events, one thing that I just want to call attention to, in not a fully informed way, but just seeing the chatter in Facebook about it, as you were talking about this resolution, and Josh, is to kind of call us back to some of the founding principles for our Constitution and so forth. Folks may or may not know that with the recently concluded town election, there was some question about some of the write-in votes for I think it was a planning board seat. And so petitions were gathered to do a recount for at least that portion of the vote. One of the folks really arguing or pushing for that recount has been extremely appreciative in his public comments about how well the town came together to make sure that we had enough signers of that petition in I guess 9 of the 10 precincts in order to facilitate that, and spoke to the when push comes to shove, the town does the right thing in terms of upholding the principles on which we're founded and on which we conduct elections. So I just wanted to give some visibility to that as well. I think it was great. Brinley, what do we need to pay attention to this week and next?
Sure. I first will say that this year there's something new on the town website, and that is a main page to see all of the runners for Natick in one place, and learn about them and see who's running for what. It's actually a really cool page that Jay put together. It's kind of nice. And I put it in the links, and in that happens to be Pat and Pat's link. And so there's still time to donate. So if anybody wants to help Pat in his journey for fundraising for the marathon, please do, because it's a great cause. Keep Natick beautiful. So so proud of you, Pat, for running and doing this. That's quite a journey. So kudos to you for doing that. And then so there's two things that I think are big this week. One is tonight is the Memorial School Building Committee meeting. I did put a link in there. I can't remember if it starts at 5 or 5:30. It's very early, and it is the OPM decision. So OPM stands for Owner's Project Manager. So they are picking the people. I've mentioned this before. They will be picking the group that will be managing the school building, the Memorial School Building project for the school committee and for the school administration in the town. And so tonight, everyone will be hearing the 3 presentations from the 3 finalists. I do believe it's slated, if all goes well, for the building committee to vote on which one. There is limited to no opportunity for the public to actually have input on this at this stage of the game at the meeting. But I do think being there for support is good if you're able. And if you have questions, certainly reach out to the chair. And I did put the link in there. And then on Thursday, one of the big things that Natick has been talking a lot about is the downtown improvement project for bike paths or no bike paths and changing parking and everything that's happening. And that big public meeting is on Thursday. So I also put the link for that in the chat, and that starts at 6:00. And I do think that it's really great for everyone to participate in that as much as possible. It's our town. These are our improvements. Improving accessibility and walkability and biking are all big subjects. And so I do hope that we would all participate in that as much as possible. And again, that is this Thursday at 6.
Thanks, Brinley. And I want to point out, Catherine has put in the chat as well that at a select board meeting this week is the legislative update. So Senator Spilka and Representative Linsky will be, looks like, on hand. And there will be some citations for Paul Carew and Rich Sidney. So that might be something to take in as well. I see Carrie's got his hand up, and I also just wanted to, certainly Todd and Jeff happy to have you guys stay on, but if you need to drop off, that's fine too. So
thanks again for the opportunity to talk today. I will drop off, but
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing everyone this next couple of weeks.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for changing the tone of town meeting. I just want to say that before you leave. I was there for the final night back in fall, and it's definitely a different feeling to town meeting. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Appreciate that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff and Todd.
And Todd.
Yeah.
Quick announcement. Many of you know, but in case you don't, a little less than 3 weeks on Sunday, May 3rd, there'll be a repair cafe at the Native Community Senior Center. So yay, 7th one. So come on down, start collecting your things that need repair, and come on down 2 to 5 at the Senior Center, May 3rd.
We've got a light to bring this time, so cool.
And to tag on that, I will say that also that happens to be Earth Day all around Natick weekend, and which I haven't been talking about enough, but I should be talking about more. So that is also we are including Carrie's Repair Cafe in our Earth Day all around Natick outreach, because we consider that to be an important part of sustainability, and fantastic. So thank you for doing that, Carrie. And the Earth Day Fair will be that Saturday, the day before, and it will happen at the same time as the farmers market, and we'll have a bunch of tables for that. And the signs have started going out for it. And if anybody wants to participate by tabling on Saturday or by holding their own event, for instance, in the past, Martin has led walks, and Sarah has some stuff. And so if anybody, we're a little short on around town events. So if anybody is up for creating one, please reach out to me directly. I'd love to help you do that and help get it on the calendar.